afternoon. Thank you for attending the session, X's and O's with the WIAA. My name is Mike Humke. I'm the current WASB president and a member of the Board of Control for the WIAA. With us today, from my right to my left, is Mel Dow. He is the Associate Director of WIAA. LeVar Ridgway, Assistant Director, WIAA. Stephanie Hauser, the Executive Director. Carl Morin, Board Member and Northwestern District Administrator. And Jill Stober, Board Member and Athletic Director for Waterford. I want to welcome you all here. The presentation is going to go over the X's and O's of sports in the WIAA, how the administration works, and how the Board of Control helps create the rules and policies that affect our kids in education and in sports. I'm going to have to leave early because I have a presentation down the hall, and they've set me up for rehearsal while this is going on. So I'm going to have to step away, and first we have Stephanie.
Before Mike runs out, what I want to do is first of all thank him for encouraging us to do this presentation at the conference. This is something that I don't know that has been done before, but Mike said, I think there's just a lot of how the WIAA works that people will be interested in hearing. School leaders in the room, I know you probably get a lot of this. This might be redundant, but for school board members, this might be brand new things that you are just learning about. And it is important for us that you feel like you are informed. And so when you get those calls from your constituents, that you feel comfortable in providing them with information that's accurate. So I just want to thank you, Mike, for encouraging us to do this and also for joining us, at least just for a little bit.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to LeVar. Thanks, Mike. One more before I run.
Yep. So before we get started, just wanted to, while Mike runs out, we just want to give him another thank you as his term is running out. His term runs out in 2025, so we just wanted to thank him for his service and all the great things that he has done as a representative of WASB. So thank you, Mike. So obviously you met Mike, one of our Board of Control members. If you look at the slide here, we have a picture of 11 amazing people with very fancy blazers on. Those are our Board of Control members. We have 11 Board of Control members. We have 7 district representatives, and then also 3 at-large representatives and your WASB rep. So we feel that it's important to have the at-large representatives, whether it's the non-public school, the minority at-large representative, or the gender minority rep, to have a diverse group of people at the table. This group is responsible for all things WIAA, and is the governing body that looks at and interprets our bylaws, constitutions, and rules and regulations. And also, if there is an appeal, this board is the board that takes a look at appeals and makes a final decision on appeals of rules and regulations or eligibility. Oh, thank you. So for the election process, as you look at the district reps and you see their term expiring, each term is a 3-year term. And within the districts, you need to be nominated for that district, and the member schools within that district vote you in for your 3-year term. You're eligible to serve up to 2 consecutive 3-year terms. If you do serve 2 consecutive 3-year terms, you must be out for another 3 years before you're considered to come in again. So if you are interested, as you look at your district, if you are qualified as an administrator in your district and you're looking to become a Board of Control member, we'd love to have you.
If I could just add 2 things to LeVar's slides and comments. If you are a school board member in the room and you are interested in Mike Humke's position, please connect with Dan Ross Miller. That is something that is elected through their own process, through their board, and then they notify us who that representative will be on our Board of Control. So please see Mike see Dan if you'd like more information about that. In addition to our Board of Control, there are 2 liaison positions that exist. One is a representative from the DPI, so Paul Manrique is currently the person from DPI that is a liaison on the WIAA Board of Control, non-voting member. And then the second liaison position is to the Wisconsin Athletic Directors Association. They have their president-elect, I believe is the position, or vice president, that serves in that capacity for 1 year. So we do receive input from those two groups, but again, those are non-voting members, not one of the elected 11. Any comments and questions on Board of Control for LeVar or any of us? We'll try to give a pause at the end of each slide, and then again, question and answer time at the end for the topics that you would like to talk about that we didn't have a chance to cover. So Jill will speak to you next about WIAA finances, especially because she is currently in the role as elected by the board as the treasurer of the board.
Good afternoon, and thanks for coming out. So every year at our annual meeting, this is actually a report that I am responsible for giving. And so this is some of the information that is provided to the member schools at that annual meeting. And part of that is the fact that a couple of things that we want to make sure that people understand is one, membership fees or membership dues was taken away back in 15-16 school year. So it has been 10 years that we have not charged our member schools any type of fee to be part of the membership of the WIAA and its membership group. Also with that, there are absolutely no tax dollars whatsoever that are part of the revenue aspect of the WIAA. So if you see there, 85% of our tournament events are really what brings in most of the revenue for the WIAA. And with that being said, as you probably imagine, weather and matchups tend to kind of dictate how that's going to be at the tournaments. But over the last few years after we came out of the pandemic, one of the most exciting things is the WIAA is very financially stable. And the goal is to start giving back more to the membership schools. And if you may not be aware, we gave back $3.1 million to membership schools last year. $3.1 million, and we saved $1.9 million. And that was a result of our staff doing a lot of great things to try to mainstream how the tournaments were being run, get more sponsorships for the different tournaments, and really kind of stabilize things because we didn't know what was going to happen, just like you guys did not know what was going to happen during the pandemic. So that was huge for us. And so we've been financially stable for the last few years here coming out of the pandemic, and we've been able to give more back to the schools. With that being said, too, last year, as the Board of Control, we decided with the staff to have like a budget cycle, starting to review some of the things that have never been touched before. And so things like the official fees that are official payments that they get for like the state tournaments was looked at, game worker payments, and then we're also taking a look at how can we give more money back to the revenues, give more revenue back to the schools that are hosting the regionals and sectionals, schools that are, helping out with different aspects, or the travel expenses when you do make a state tournament. A lot of people don't understand that aspect, that money is given back to WIA schools when your schools are qualifying for the tournament. So that was kind of a rotation that was done, that was put together last year. Again, it's going to review official fees. It's going to review school transportation or travel reimbursements. We're going to look at ticket prices, the regional and sectional hosting fees, and that revenue share percentage. A lot of times, as an athletic director, we get asked the questions, when it comes tournament time, is the WIA always getting that money? That's not the case. The money is being split through revenue share with the schools, and we are looking at more ways to give back to the schools. Thank you.
One other thing that I think is a common misconception is that the WIA indeed is not a government entity. We're not a branch of the DPI. We're not a branch of our educational governmental portion. It truly is a not-for-profit private business. And so people are often surprised when they see that zero tax dollars. They think, well, there's a percentage of tax dollars you get, isn't there? We don't. It is a not-for-profit small business. But again, because we're closely tied with groups like WASB, we represent member schools. I think that is a common misconception. Are there any questions that you have right now about WIA finances, expenses, revenues? Oh, I don't have that at my fingertips. Anybody have it? Gross? 9 million? 9 million, okay. Okay. Yep, thank you. Other questions about operating revenues? Yes, thank you.
Given the shortage of officials and referees, I was wondering about that 4% that we gained from registration. And I wonder if those fees are a stumbling block.
It's a good question. We, right now, the fees that officials pay to license, they cover their rules books, they cover the insurance that they receive through WIAA. So if there is an injury, they do receive insurance from us. And then they cover just processing fees for them. So there is a certain piece of their expense that covers also their background check is covered in that. We don't make a lot on their registration. We make a little. Now, to your question specifically, the NASO, which is the National Organization of Sport Officials, did a very large survey. Is anybody in the room a member of NASO as a licensed official? It's a huge survey, and one of the things that was interesting that came back from them was that cost to license or cost to maintain licensure was very, very low on the list of why you didn't become an official or why you chose not to stay an official. So can you imagine what the number one reason was that officials left officiating? Adult behavior. We won't put it all in the parent group, but adult behavior. That was the number one reason why officials left the profession. The number one reason why officials came to the profession and stayed in the profession was the relationships that they made with other officials. Because it's a neat network of, friendships. If you've ever been on an officiating crew and those road trips and travels to different cities, it really is what keeps people involved. But we haven't seen it as a barrier. Just as recently as yesterday, our newest assistant director hired Chad Schultz, who Donna knows. He's from Winneconne, from her hometown. He is just met with the Donovan Group yesterday. We are going to be doing our own survey of all licensed officials in Wisconsin to ask them questions just like that. So they met yesterday to start reviewing that. That probably will launch this summer, and I think we'll get a little bit more feedback on the whys or why not that officials are choosing to be involved. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Is everybody able to hear that question? If not, are you able to hear that one? Otherwise, we've got another mic that I can share. Just raise your hand if you're glad to.
One thing with that too, one of the things that happened about 3 years ago is we reduced late fees.
Oh,
so that we
thank
could
you.
have more officials joining and not being worried about the fact that when there was a late fee that was happening because they didn't get a chance to get it turned in on time, that late fee is we waived. So we have like periods of time that we try to get more officials from that time.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's great. In conjunction with that, we moved to a 3-window licensing opportunity. In the past, it was May 1 to June 30th, and if you missed that window, you paid late fee or processing fees. And now we have 3 windows. One that does happen in May, but again, one in October, and then one in January. And if you license during any one of those 3 periods, there aren't any late fees or processing fees. Our numbers of licensed officials are back and actually have surpassed where they were pre-COVID. So we're over 10,000. We hit that last year for the first time in WIAA history. I don't want to trick you into thinking that there's not an official shortage. There is. What is a little bit deceiving about that, but also exciting, we have, I believe, 60-some high schools that now teach officiating classes to their students in high school. Anybody in the room have those in their district? So we have a bigger number than ever before. Last year was 1,500 high school students licensed. That doesn't give your varsity programs immediate help. They're still looking for those veteran officials, and there's where the shortage exists. But it's exciting seeing so many young kids getting involved and knowing that hopefully help is on the way. And as schools are also tackling that number one elephant in the room, the adult behavior, hopefully that will help encourage kids to get involved and stay involved. So the shortage is not past, and we are definitely going to dig deeper in with that survey as to why officials are staying away or why we're not keeping them for real long.
This might seem like a unique question, but I get this question a lot as a board member. So when there's playoff games and it's like a $6 charge to get in, how much do you guys get and how much is the school getting for that?
It depends on the sport. Generally speaking, it's a 55-45 split. WIA takes 55 and the school keeps 45%. The Board of Control makes that decision through our budget review cycle, which, as Jill mentioned, that's actually up for review this coming year.
Okay, you guys get 55 and the school, okay.
Correct. It varies a little bit from sport to sport, but generally speaking, that's the most common split. Beyond that, the school also gets a hosting stipend. They get a straight dollar amount for just hosting the event. The tournament manager, whether it's the athletic director or as a designee, also receives a hosting stipend for themselves. And then we cover all of the officials' costs, travel, and the actual fee. So those are the types of things WIA just pays for right away, and then whatever remains, there's a 55-45 split. And again, I just want to make sure you realize they're not all 55-45. There's some variances on that, but that's the most common one. That's a great question. Thank you. All right, we will move on. All right, this one comes up fairly often. Questions about how WIA rules get made or how they get changed. And so I wanted to share this flow chart with you, and we're going to talk about the 3 different common types of rules that come about. Probably, again, as we talk about misconceptions, one of the things that people don't realize is I actually never get a vote on any of these things. We can help provide guidance and information and give recommendations, but ultimately, it's a membership-driven process. So the member schools or their elected representatives are the ones that ultimately make the decision. We hope that member schools are providing their feedback to them so they feel like they are voting on behalf of their representative district. So if we move on to the second slide, Todd. The first one that we probably have the least input on are those rules of the game that come to us from our governing body, which is the National Federation of High Schools. Showed you an example of a football rule book. Again, that's produced at the national level, and those tell us how we play the game. You know, what constitutes a penalty in the sport of football, and what's that, you know, how many yards penalty is that? So those come at the national level. We do have the opportunity on a cycle to have a voice on those rules committee. We belong to Section 4 in the nation, which is Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, and Iowa. So once every 5 years, we get an opportunity to send a representative to serve on the board for those rules committees. So we have a little input, but not a lot. The next one are the season regulations, things that guide the sport in general. An example of that would be a basketball game. Our basketball season constitutes 24 games. The season begins on this day and ends on this day. Those are the types of season regulations that come through our coaches advisory committees. So if you look at the bottom on the yellow, each sport has a respective coaches advisory committee. They propose recommendations for change, and then it moves through the different committees to sports advisory committee first, which are 14 athletic directors from across the state. Then to our staff, we give input and advisement. Next, it goes to the advisory council, who are elected representatives from across the state of small, medium, and large schools. And then finally to the Board of Control. If it is a situation where they make a recommendation, which comes up a lot, the shot clock, that's not mandated by the National Federation and will cost the district money if mandated, that would be one more step which lumps it into this next slide. But the vast majority of season regulations fall into that process I just explained, works up the committee levels. So the next example is when there's a proposal for a constitutional change. For example, eligibility of a student athlete, a transfer rule, some of those that encompass all sports, allowance of summer coaching contact. This would then go to the annual meeting in April for all member schools to come, and each member school gets one vote to make to cast their decision on a constitutional change. And the one addition was what I just mentioned before. If there's a season regulation that's not a mandated rule book rule that's going to cost the district money, then it goes this pathway as well. Any comments or questions on how rules are made or changed? Go ahead, Mel. Why don't you go to the microphone?
I think it's important for everyone to know that with constitutional bylaws and rules of eligibility, there is a process for that change to get initiated, and there's 4 of those. First is the Board of Control can make a recommendation on a constitutional bylaws or rules of eligibility. The Advisory Council may also make a recommendation. So those are the first 2 and the most common. So as representatives of the districts, you speak to your Board of Control members, they hear that feedback, and then they make a recommendation on a rule change. But there are 2 more that are more school-driven in that process. The third is by a petition, where it is signed by 10% of the membership. If it's passed by 10% of the membership, or signed rather, then that goes to the membership for a vote at the annual meeting. And then the fourth and final is by a motion that's made on the floor at the annual meeting, where, again, a member makes a motion, it's seconded, and it's voted on. That motion then goes to a vote the year following. Each one of these have at least a 3-month process in order to be vetted, to make sure that there's no unintended consequences, make sure that it falls in lines with NFHS rules and so forth. And so again, those are the 4 different ways that schools themselves have a voice in how their membership rules are written. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Yeah, we got a question. Great question. So he asked the question of if when the membership votes down an amendment, that it comes back up, or why is it not just a dead amendment and therefore done? Because the membership gives the opportunity, or is given the opportunity, to continue to evaluate their rules and how it best applies. Specifically, he talked about the name, image, and likeness rule that was voted on last year that was narrowly defeated. And that the board brought that membership or that rule forward once again for this year. Now, truth be told, it may not be on the ballot come April, okay, because it has to go through an approval process yet by the Advisory Council and the Board of Control, where they could still defeat it. But the reason why they brought it forward to this point is because the membership has told them that, yes, there were unanswered questions last year, is why many of them were not confident in voting it through. But throughout the year, those questions were answered, and they've asked for it because they feel it's in the best interest of the membership moving forward. So that's why it was able to come forward. Again, completely a membership-driven process. Any other questions on the rulemaking process?
Just got to hit the button.
Nope, you just, Todd's got it.
Oh, Todd's got it. Okay. All right. So the big question was with how the WIAA was evolved. The WIAA was the first association in the 50 states. It was founded in 1896. And the private schools, the WISA Association, started in 1957. In 1994, the WIAA membership voted to allow WISA schools to participate in the WIAA tournament series in the sports of hockey, swim and dive, gymnastics, and girls golf. In January of 96, the Wisconsin Independent Schools Athletic Association Board voted to cease administrative operations as of June 30th, 2000. With the dissolution of the WISA and the non-public schools, the WIAA had no options but to look at bringing in the private schools into the WIAA. Otherwise, if they didn't, it was going to be mandated by legislation. At the April 23rd, 1997 annual meeting, the WIAA membership passed 6 constitutional amendments by 90% margin to allow the non-public schools to become members of the WIAA effective 2000-2001 school year. This included the expansion of the WIAA Board of Control to include the non-public board members. The first year of the combined WIAA and the WISA schools was 2000-2001. Any questions on that? I know private public is always a big topic. Yeah. Do I think it's an A? Yeah. No, good question. Okay, so I went through the ranks of a coach, and when I coached a lot of private schools, against private schools and that. And I coached basketball at some public schools when I was a teacher, yep. And I'm from northwestern Wisconsin, and so you hear a lot of rhetoric from the Northwest about the private schools and that. As the years have gone on, I've found out that, they're just kids like our kids. They're just participating. They're working hard. The coaches are good people. They're just trying to build their programs. They're maybe in areas where they can maybe get more kids from the area. I don't think it's as big as a problem as some people think. I think if our private school rep was here today, he would say it's a privilege to be a member of the WIAA, and he's at Eau Claire Regis. He's the president up there. He has been a great ambassador for the private schools in the WIAA Board of Control, and so I think it's something that we're working to alleviate and to fix and to, it doesn't matter if you're a public school, a private school, or a charter school. You're a member of the association, and that's the way we look at it, and that's the way I look at it now as a board member. Yeah, go ahead.
If I could just add to that, I think one thing that changed the narrative a little bit was when open enrollment became allowed. And so the argument that the private schools can pull kids and we can't, that did lessen that or soften that argument, because public schools can too. It's called open enrollment. So the private schools follow the exact same rules that the public schools do. It's one membership, and the rules apply across the board. Certainly, there are still people that remember WISA, and some people that ask, why doesn't it go back? I remember I was an athletic director, a new athletic director, when Doug Chickering stood before us and said that this will be legislated upon us. I would ask that we consider to adopt our private member schools as one association. And I would tell you, grade-wise, I think it's going excellent. I think our membership would tell you it's going pretty darn well as well. So again, they're held to the same standard of accountability when it comes to student eligibility, membership expectations as the public members. But it is something that you hear about a lot, and that's why we intentionally put it in this presentation, just to give you the opportunity to ask questions or to hear more and learn about how the two associations became one. Not planned, but hey. The question was, would we consider staying one association? But then I'm assuming what you mean is like maybe their own division. Is that what you kind of mean? So purpose of tournaments? I don't know that that has realistically ever been asked or proposed. I don't know that legally that would hold up. I'm not sure. But the membership did implement something that Carl's going to talk about here in just a moment, which is called the competitive balance factor. And part of what you're asking is one of the reasons why that was implemented. So if you don't mind holding off on that just a little bit, we'll have Carl talk about that. Anything else right now? Thank you.
To add on that, people always up north always ask me about that, and I said, you know what, you need to look in the mirror and just say, what can I do to get better? Am I spending the time in the gym? Am I spending the time in the weight room? Are we going out of the area to play bigger schools? Sometimes you just, bottom line is just get better and beat them. And that's, I'm a realist nowadays, and I just, I don't complain about it and don't point the finger. And my son played in the state tournament and lost to a private school, but, he played with those guys in AAU, and they're friends, and it's just, you compete, and there's a winner and there's a loser, and that's just kind of how that goes in sports. So All right, back to where we're moving to. So the 2024-25 classification committee, about 3 years ago, we started an ad hoc committee on looking at competitive balance, because we felt there wasn't an equity of not a competitive balance. Maybe some schools were, had more opportunities for their kids in that. So this group is made up of athletic directors, superintendents, principals from the 7 districts across the state. I was on this for the first 3 years, and we dive into, what is competitive balance? How do we set this up, and how do we look at, how would we move teams up if they're winning championships and they get moved up? And the process was, if they gain 3 points in a sport, or if they gain 6 points in a sport over a 3-year period, they're going to get moved up. So they gain a point if they win a regional championship. They get 2 points if they win a sectional championship. If they get to the state championship game, they get 3 points, and if they win the whole thing, they get 4. So a team could get 6 points in 2 years if they won a state title the first year and then got to the sectionals the second year. And then then the 3rd-year process, they get looked at. We're ready for the next move on that. Next slide. Yep, go ahead, pop in.
I do want to speak to the work of that inaugural committee. They examined plans like this from across the nation. They looked at probably at minimum 8 to 9 different plans. No state association has found the magic answer is to how do we make every school district feel like they have a chance? Not necessarily that they're going to win the gold ball, but they feel like they have a chance. So the Board of Control approved the committee to hire Baird to do some data studying on tournament participation, tournament success, different divisions, different sports, private, public, affluent areas. And they did find some statistical significance in some sports, mostly in the middle divisions, tied to socioeconomic average household income. So they did see some significance tied to that. And that's where the committee continued forward with the work. Some of the statements that they made to the membership was this. 50 years ago, it was real simple. Just take the school's enrollment and put them in a division. In 2021, at that time, they just really felt like it's just not that simple anymore. There are a lot of factors that make that complicated. Some of our largest schools in the state aren't competitive in anything. So it's not so simple. It's not just enrollment. It's where you're located geographically. Can you pull from other areas through open enrollment? It's what your social economic status of your district looks like. Are you an affluent area? Are you in an urban area where you have a lot of access to club coaches and specialized trainers? There's just so many factors that make it a more complicated answer than simply using school enrollment. And that's where this competitive balance plan was born from. They took a couple different state associations that they really liked the formulas that they were using. They made a Wisconsin plan, and that's how they proposed it to the membership. And that passed at an annual meeting. It was a constitutional change just 2 years ago. So this is the first year of actual implementation of the new competitive balance plan. Carl's going to speak to you about what that looks like right now based upon sport-by-sport outcomes on that.
So if you look up on the board, boys cross country had 10 schools that got bumped up a division. And there were 434 teams that made it to state. Or is that correct? No, is that correct? 400?
10 schools received the 6 points.
10 teams. Okay, 10 teams received the 6 points, but only 7 teams were promoted up. Now, the reason there's 7 is maybe a couple teams were Division I already, so there's nowhere for them to go, and the other ones could have appealed to the board or to the competition committee, and they were denied. But if you look at the percentage of promoted teams out of all the cross-country teams in the state, of the 434, it's only 1.61% got promoted up. Girls cross-countries had 11, and then 7 were promoted up, 1.62. Football, that's one of our biggest sports. 15 teams received 6 points out of the 361 teams. 13 were promoted out of the 15 were promoted up. That's a 3.6%. So, looking at this data, you can kind of go through the data of all the different seasons with everything. This is just 1 year of data we're looking at right now. Now, when you do something new, you need a few years of data. I said it when I was on a committee, I said, in 5 years, this is going to work out fine. And I think it is working out fine. I've seen it in, there was a football team that was promoted up from Division III to Division II, and they were right back in the championship game this year. And so I said they can compete at the Division II level. I think in time you will see that this plan is gonna take away all the competitive issues that we see in the state. Now, I'm going to say this personally as a coach, somebody who coached for a lot of years, been on the Board of Control, and I've seen other states, associations, and how they work things. We have a great state association for our athletics. It's unbelievable. I will put it up against any state in this union, and our state tournaments are. There's some states that have their state tournament in a high school, and we get to play at the Kohl Center or Camp Randall Stadium or the Resch Center in Green Bay. I mean, Fox River Stadium in Appleton. I mean, what other association gets that for all their sports, for all their student athletes? So I think we've got a great association. I think we've got a great plan of moving forward into the future, and I think in time everybody will see that this works. Question. No, I think they're going to stay. They're going to stay. Yeah, they're going to stay in this area. I think. I mean, you're not going to have a huge. You're not talking about a bunch of schools that are going to get. There's not going to be a lot of teams bumped up from Division III to Division II. It's going to be. You're going to have maybe. The real elite programs are going to get bumped up a division. It's not. And then you're going to have that. I'll take Solon Springs as an example. Team in northwestern Wisconsin has a history of just not being good at basketball or anything. And I grew up there for 40 years. And then the last 2 years, they've had an outstanding basketball team. They made it to the state tournament. Now, if they make it to win the regional final, they would possibly get put into this and get bumped up to Division IV. But they could appeal and say, hey, this is one group of kids from Solon Springs that it was a team of a lifetime, and they would probably win that appeal. And so if they didn't gain any points in that next division over 2 years, below 6, yeah, then they drop back down. So you had a question, ma'am. Okay. Yes. Oh, I got one right here. You want to add on? I mean, yeah, I'll let Stephanie add on that a little bit because it's been a year and a half since.
Sure. The committee created an appeal application that has 8 different categories. You got a scan code when you came in. If you scan on that, it'll take you to the competitive balance page, or else just connect with your athletic director. So you look at 8 different areas when considering an appeal. So certainly there's subjectivity, but you've got an appeal board of 15 that looks at that to consider whether that should be granted or not. As Carl said, if any of those areas are significant that the committee feels it should be an exception to the rule, an appeal is granted. This is meant to be a dynamic system. You go up because you've continued to win, you stay there until your points fall below 6 and you come back down. It's meant to move teams back and forth. Now, some of our schools already are on an enrollment cut line, so they're actually accustomed to that already. They bump up 1 year because their enrollment went up by 10 students. The next year they're down. But this adds another element of movement between divisions. The other thing that the committee is going to track, and they started it this fall, is how well did those teams fare that were promoted up. Did they continue to have success? So they want to also track that in addition to the points. But this was a good snapshot of just year one, what does it look like? And it'll be really interesting to see how this looks over time. It's a good question. I don't know if those percentages will change. Because it's over 3 years, I would imagine it would be somewhat steady, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a fair comment. One thing I will say is that state associations across the nation hear those same concerns. No one has developed some type of a magic formula to fix it. It doesn't exist. So what the committee really felt like with this shows that the committee has taken some steps to address your concerns. Does this fix it? It addresses it. And to your point, it is a small percentage, and so the rumbling and the grumbling, from a data perspective, I couldn't agree more. It's a minimal number, but when it happens to be your school and your team, it feels differently, even if it is a very small percent. It's very emotional for you, and so it matters. But again, the membership voted this in overwhelmingly. It is new. The committee believes that they do not want to make major changes to it, the number of years, the number of points, accepting certain sports out until they've had a chance to see some data play out. We have 2 questions, if I could take those. Okay. Yep. So your comment question is, it's a 2-piece answer. One is your regular season play. That's your conference, and that is a membership-driven ask. Ultimately, the Board of Control has that authority, but it goes through a vetting process of where you play your conference games during regular season. Each member school has the opportunity every other year to ask for new conference placement. So you do, as a school, have that option every other year. This year it's a football ask. Next year it's other sports. You have that option to request a new place to play your regular season games. A lesser talked about piece of this new proposal that the membership voted on, there's an option to request down a division in a sport that you have had essentially no success for prolonged periods of time. We did indeed have schools request down. Majority of those were granted. They didn't turn around and win state championships, but in some cases they thanked the committee because they actually in one case, had a volleyball match. They actually won their first regional match in 20-some years. And when they came to the committee to ask for the appeal, they hadn't won a single set in volleyball in the regionals in over a decade. So that is a lesser part talked about this, but it is an option as well to request down when you're just not experiencing any success. Did that kind of address your question? Okay, thank you. A couple more. One in the back. You've been waiting. Very, very few were granted last year. Last year was the very first year of the asks. There was one granted in each of the 3 seasons. So, what's that? Okay. So, as you know, as they collect that data, the membership has asked us to share that with them as well. So starting next fall at the area meetings, we'll give them all of that data too. Todd Clark reports those out each time the committee meets, so it is shared publicly the number of schools that asked for an appeal and then how many were granted. The extra thing that we've added this year is the sharing of the school name as well. In year 1, the committee didn't feel comfortable necessarily sharing out the school names that asked for appeals. But in year 2, now the membership has said, we would like to know who's asked for an appeal. And so our press release this fall did share those individual school names as well. Couple more questions? Go ahead. So back to a couple slides ago when I showed you that committee process, this is an example, the question he's got about the number of 8-man teams or 8-player teams at play, that comes from a recommendation from the Football Coaches Advisory Committee and works its way through the process. Football coaches came to the office in January and they did indeed propose to double the number of 8-player teams that qualify for the playoffs. They provided statistics on why they're asked. They would, in conjunction with that, their season would start on the same day as 11-player starts, and then they would still end that week early. So they would be playing their level 1 playoffs the same week that 11 players are playing week 9. So the next step is the sports advisory. They meet next week in our office. They'll take action on that. And then ultimately, if the Board of Control says yes in February, it would be implemented for the fall of 2025. But again, it follows that process. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Yep. As Mr. Dow shared, one of the ways to bring something forward to the membership to vote on is through the petition process. Cross country has rumbled fairly significantly as a whole and didn't want to be included in the process. I will explain to you plain and simply why they were included. There are only 2 sports that are not included in this process. It's swim and dive and track and field. Those of you who have coached it or have kids that have participated, there is no team factor in those 2 sports. You can win a state championship in track and field based upon, in theory, one individual scoring points at the state tournament. Same is true in swim and dive. There is no true team component to it. You win championships based on individual performances. Cross country can qualify kids for the state tournament as an individual, but they do not earn points for that. They only earn points if their team qualifies for the state championship. So cross country, a member school initiated a petition to ask the member schools to vote on cross country being the one team sport that is excluded from this. So it will be voted on by the membership in April because it came through via petition process. Haven't heard any other rumblings by other sports at this time. I would guess if the membership says yes to this, there will be other team sports that also ask to be excluded. I don't know for a fact, but that if I had to guess, that's what I would think would happen. Question in the back? Ma'am? I didn't. It is not presently a factor. The question was, other than enrollment, is actual student body percentage participation factored in? It is not factored at this time. It is gathered, correct, good. Annually, schools do report that, the WIAA, for the purposes of national reporting, but it's not a consideration as far as tournament placement right now. Seating is, again, through the coaches. It's the process we just talked about. Any changes to the seating process in any sport would go right through that committee process. So the football coaches, if they want to make changes in their seating formula, they will propose it like they did in January, and then it would go to the Board of Control ultimately for vote. Same is true in any sport. Anything specific to competitive balance, because I do want to get through our slides. We're starting to go off topic just a little bit.
I was going to ask about
Conference
conference realignment for football. Is that settled on that, or is that
realignment for football is in the process right now. It is right in the middle of the process. It is an every other year thing. There has been some desire to expand that to every 4 years, and there's been an ask about expanding that because of conference realignment fatigue. We keep talking about this. In football, though, what's going on is there's a lot of 11-player, 8-player switching back and forth, and that impacts everybody then when someone changes.
when you decide to drop a division, right? Now you've got 8-man and you've had 7 divisions, when you go to 6 divisions and expand to 8-man.
Again, that would come through the committee process. They're not at a point where they feel like Division 7 should go away because there's an enrollment cap on 8-player football. If you have a 3-year enrollment that's greater than 200, you are not eligible for the 8-player tournament series. So Division 7 for small schools is, the football coaches still desire that to exist for small schools.